Welcome to Actionable Impact. Today we are joined by Jeff DeMarrais, the SVP and Chief Communications Officer of Cognizant. Jeff, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about this because we talked to a lot of CCOs, including some of our recent guests, all of whom are working through their AI transitions for their organizations, and all of them feel, somewhere between, they're all excited, but they're all also a little bit scared. You've articulated, I think, the most clear point of view of almost anyone I've come across, and maybe I wanted to start there, which is we think about our space. Defending the PR profession is how we lose it. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about where you're going there.
Yeah, sure. So I think the most important thing about AI adoption is if people are going to be, clutching at their pearls or, really precious about, the thing they went to school for 20 years ago in order to drive an outcome, they're going to find themselves left behind because the tools, the model of work, the expectations, the speed of outcomes requires a completely new way of thinking. And so, the original op-ed that I had responded to was really, hey, we need to be the stewards of the past. And, I've never been a steward of the past. I've been tried to be a change agent in these things. I've always loved technology, and where you can meld technology and communications together, you're not only winning, but you're repositioning the function in a way that's incrementally more valuable to the enterprise.
Well, I appreciate that. And one of the things that I've heard you also talk about is the velocity gap. And that the challenge here is not whether we adapt or don't adapt. Clearly, we're adapting. The question is really the speed.
Yeah.
And curious if you could explain to our listeners what that is, and then we can talk a little about how we close it.
Yeah, the velocity gap is a business metric. At the company level, people have bought a lot of AI product. They're yet to see the return on that investment. So companies like Cognizant, who are AI builder companies, are designed to bridge the gap between your investment and a meaningful business outcome. So within communications, the goal here is everyone's been playing with the tools on their phones at home. They may finally have gotten an enterprise license to have an LLM on their desktop at work, and they're starting to use it. And they're starting to use it in a way, and you start with experimentation, and then you have to move to implementation. Where it's going is people are actually maybe playing a little too much and not getting to the business outcomes. And that's where you start hearing about these things, the token maxing. And I think Uber ran out of its own tokens before the end of the second quarter because people were just iterating and trying. And we're actually launching new tools to help people understand. We're calling it AI Harness, to help them understand how they're using their tokens, how to optimize them. And for communicators, are you using the right tool? It'll give you a lesson back. Did you actually use the right tool? Should you have been using Claude Code? Because you're using Claude Chat and it uses 4 times as many tokens. And so getting that return is about the velocity gap. So moving from experimentation to implementation with business results is the goal. Because you have to remember in communications, I can remember when I would do recruiting on campus years ago, people say, well, I got into communications because I like people, I like to talk, I don't like math. That's not the world. Our words are our power as communicators that are going to make us hugely successful in the AI era. But you're going to have to back it up with new world metrics around value and tokens.
Well, terrific. Can we talk a little about your team for a second? And, maybe starting with your own team as a microcosm and sort of moving out to some of your clients and the tech companies and everything else. But on your team, what do you think are to your point on business metrics, what are the business metrics that your team is really seeing AI move the ball on?
Sure. Well, let me back up and tell a story of how my team got involved, and then we can talk about the metrics.
Please.
So just a year ago, not even a year ago, my CEO came to me and said, we're going to run the world's largest vibe coding event. Okay. Vibe coding was barely in the vernacular. And so as a company, we moved really fast. We lined up a bunch of different partners, set up bespoke training, and literally set up a vibe coding contest, which ended up going on to be the Guinness Book of World Records record for an AI coding event.
Incredible.
This changed not only our ability to understand what we were telling our clients we could do, it completely changed the culture of our organization, and in particular, my team. My team will now spin up an agent to solve a problem and cross-collaborate with others with an orchestrator to create tools that communicators can use to solve problems. It's as simple as that. And so the metrics we look at, we actually have AI fluency scores. It's on our phones. It's on our desktop. You can see whether you've taken your courses, are you using the tools, are you using them properly? Have you contributed some form of creation or thought leadership? And we literally have a score. My score just dropped recently because they didn't actually take my op-ed yet. I'm waiting for it to land. So I'll be back to 100 when they take my op-ed.
I'm hoping you get credit for this podcast.
Hope
It's
so
like
too.
continual learning. Yeah.
That's why I'm doing it.
Well, and so could you give me some examples? What are some of the places where your team has really found value in the tools
Sure.
today?
So, the basics that everybody's using, getting quicker content creation. Largely, I shifted my model from a team that was very highly optimized on internal communications to a team that could take content, audience agnostic, and be able to use the AI tools to spin out content that would be for internal or external. So that allowed me to reposition the staffing of the team. When we went to Davos last year, my CEO was supposed to interview with Richard Quest. Ravi Kumar is my CEO. I had never done an interview with Richard, but I knew he was an advocate for AI. So using 5 different LLMs, we spun up a model to figure out what Richard's views on AI were, where my CEO's views were, where did they combine, where did they differ, and allowed me to create a new brief that literally helped my CEO bridge back to topics that the journalist was interested in. So if he went into a hole. So basic media briefing content is changed forever. But we're really using it now to find the white space. We have a tool called Fortune Teller. And this was put together by my chief of staff, Avalon Taylor. And she put together an LLM based, I think this one is Copilot based, that scours our news, scours the outside news, figure out who's not telling the story that we could be telling, and then helps us ideate on a pitch and to whom we might go to it. And then, the biggest value we've gotten in the short term is a model called Agency in a Box. An Agency in a Box was something that we created because our Americas business was going to market. They had gone to market, let's say, with 8 industry verticals, and they had changed the model. They were going to 20. I wasn't going to get, 12 more communicators. I needed to find a way to stratify the ask and be able to create smart communications content on an outbound basis. So Agency in a Box actually was lifted from my old days doing PR for computer books. I had authors that were bestsellers and authors that were going to sell books, and I had to support them. And there's a difference between a bestseller and someone who sells books. So similarly, we have parts of our business that are huge revenue generators, and they deserve as much attention as we can give them. And then there are those that are fledgling and growing, and we have to nurture them and grow them and get them going. They both need support. So through this Agency in a Box, it'll spit out a full peso model, which then my team can identify through the human lens, make sure it makes sense, make sure it matches the executive's voice, and then go start doing that outreach. Now, interestingly, that Agency in a Box came out of the vibe coding event. So originally I had presentations from my creative agencies externally, my PR agencies, saying, we think you should start using some AI models, and we're happy to work with you to build some agents. And they presented an incredibly reasonable proposal. I think it was 4 agents for $50,000, build, maintain, grow over a 12-month period. Did not seem egregious to me at the time until I realized the 4 agents that they had pitched to me, we had actually already created for free in our vibe coding event. And the last of which might be our greatest ROI, is we built a full digital twin of leadership communication. So there are certain executives where we can get first, second drafts in 100% authentic voice based on thousands of voice artifacts that we have over their time leading at Cognizant.
That is one that I think is a pattern that we are hearing on this podcast, and that we're particularly as we relate to executives and CEOs, less people that don't necessarily have the corpus of the history, but certainly for leaders.
Well, you need the corpus, but honestly, to go back to the vibe coding piece, I built that twin. And I haven't done math since my junior year of high school. I'm not a coder, but I got the courage from vibe coding along with the tools on my desktop to start ideating and growing. And I spent an hour with our head of AI to discuss the concept. He gave me some ideas. I said, will you help me build it? He said, I think you can do it. And I did.
That's awesome. I love that spirit. One of the challenges I imagine you have is that your clients are not novices to AI and technology. They are some of the most sophisticated technology buyers in the world. How do you think about adapting, your language really for them? And as you sell, all of these tools to an increasingly skeptical, messy AI audience, is that a harder audience to reach and break through?
Less so because of the business dynamic I described earlier. We're not in the creation of the LLM platforms. Our role is to make sure you can implement those technologies within your infrastructure. And this is how we were built. Cognizant was built originally in the eve of Y2K to make sure that companies could survive and thrive post Y2K. Of course, that did not turn out to be the catastrophe everyone thought it was. But then the IT services model, where if you had SaaS or on-prem software, someone had to make that work. You can't just go buy AI and stick it in your enterprise and say, we're now AI'd. It doesn't work that way. There's nuances to your network. There's security protocols. There's your own data that's got to fit. How do you integrate with the cloud? All the things that you need to do to make it work. It's the same thing with AI. So our role is to make sure that we're hearing their context, understand their business case, and help them maximize what they've already spent money on to go get the business value at the back end of it. So actually, that story is, the AI builder story is quite easy to articulate and for people to understand.
That makes sense. All right, let's play a little buzzword bingo, if you will, for a second. I think we've hit a few of them. We've certainly talked a little bit about vibe coding. We've talked a little bit about agents, but I wonder if I think I've heard you and the company talk a lot about not just single agents, but in particular sort of teams of agents.
Multi-agent systems.
Yes, and I wonder if you could talk a little about how you're seeing them for the communications function specifically.
So the digital twin we built, the digital twin is a multi-agent system. And it's not one LLM saying, mimic the voice of this executive. It has an agent that collects the data. So at the end of the day, a single agent can do a single job. That's how they're designed. But if you have a multi-agent system, you can combine a series of tasks that are going to get you a more authentic and a more sophisticated outcome. And that's what we did with our digital twin. The other thing to do is to have an orchestrator. And an orchestrator, a different buzzword, sits on top of a non-multi-agent system, has individual agents that allows them to connect the dots. So you could do that if you're thinking like doing an executive briefing for a media interview or a town hall. And it could pull on, a sentiment agent, a messaging agent, an audience agent, and combine those into, an outcome that you require for the briefing.
Love it. Let's talk metrics for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right that you are a patent holder?
I am a patent holder.
And have been sort of on this journey for a long time?
Yeah, I way back in the day, I worked for GE, and at the advent of social media, people were trying to figure out exactly what it meant, how you could either influence it or understand it. And so I was part of a team that got a patent to try and track the influence between media, social media, and stock price, which I think we all know today there's no direct correlation. However, certain spikes and troughs of activity will drive stock price for sure. And so that patent was created, and actually that was I took the patent document and used that as my vibe coding product because I never got to see it in real life. So I took the language and dropped that into Lovable and created prompts to build that. And it was maybe the wonkiest thing I've created. First of all, it was the first thing I'd done, but I had flashing lights and I had, metrics that made no sense, and I didn't really understand it. I knew the patent made sense, but 20 years later, I couldn't visually make it happen. But then when I moved to more sophisticated tools for me that made sense with GitHub and Claude and other technologies, Cognizant's own Neuro AI platform, I was able to do something more meaningful. But yeah, it was all based on the patent originally.
Well, and given that perspective, how has measurement evolved today? Are we still sort of chasing, in your view, determining smoke from fire, or do you feel confident we can tell which is which?
In regards to content that we're putting out, or
the one I get most frequently is, we're getting attacked from this thing, or we're worried about this thing. Do we need to respond? How big is this going to get?
Look, I think where I spend my time is less about that. I mean, threat detection is threat detection. I have teams in my company that pay attention to that. We work very closely together. What I think more about from a more traditional communications standpoint is I grew up, one of my first roles at NBC was to create the clip pack every day.
Sure.
So I led a team. I was a junior publicist, I had 7 NBC pages. We'd show up at 6 in the morning. We'd read 7 newspapers. We had 14 newspapers because I read 7 of them. They had 7 of them. Cut, paste, photocopy, sent it up to the CEO. He approved it. We then distributed it every single day, stapled, double-sided photocopy. And that's sort of like the traditional thump pack of the publicist. You got your clips, you drop it on the desk, thump. We did a great job. Now, I look at clips, stories, outcomes as one thing. They're data. And what do I do with the data? Well, it's interesting that we have share of voice. It's interesting that we had an audience size of X, old thinking. The way we think about it is the Maryushka dolls, the Russian nesting dolls. The clips are the smallest doll. It's just the data. Okay, what do we do with that? Well, based on that data, how do we optimize our storytelling? Based on our optimized storytelling, how are we performing and hitting the company's messages? Based on those company messages, how are we growing the business through our quarterly business review? Based on growing the business for the quarterly business review, how do I then go ask for incremental budget or staffing? And based on that, how do I then go back to create more data? So that virtuous cycle of clips is simply data exhaust that we need to do smarter things with. And that is the result of rethinking metrics.
I love that. How about the importance of a corporate brand versus a personal brand, right? In a world of authenticity and trying to build following, as your view on the way we prioritize executive communications changed?
So for Cognizant, executive communications is an incredibly important piece of our communications matrix simply because we don't sell a product, we sell a service. Service, as a result, is people. And so our brand are our people who are sitting with clients every single day, who are selling to clients every single day. So for our leaders to be able to articulate the value proposition of what we do as AI builders in order to explain what we're selling, it's less about a cult of personality and telling the story of them as a leader, as a person, and more how they represent for their product vertical, for their region, how they represent Cognizant. So it's a little bit of both, to be honest.
Yeah. And how do you stay current personally? Obviously, you're using this stuff every day, but are there things that you read, follow, Substacks, individuals?
I spend a lot of time on social media. I spend a lot of time looking at certain feeds in X, in Instagram. I'm a lighter user on Substack. I'm just waiting for a little more scale there, but there are great tips. To be honest, we have a really great ecosystem within my comms team. So we share on a regular basis. We sort of have lunch and learns, all hands. There was a marketing vibe coding. We sit under the global marketing organization, and we had a vibe coding event, and the comms team, our small and mighty comms team, took a quarter of the recognition because we're tossing ideas back and forth. So part of it is just being part of a community that's willing to share its ideas. We're not threatened by the sharing. We're threatened by not knowing what to do next. And so we pull ourselves together and work together in that way.
That's a terrific attitude. One piece I also have noticed about Cognizant is that I think you've been a little contrarian on hiring and sort of the role on unemployment, and particularly sort of younger entry-level roles, and you've increased the number of entry-level roles, right?
Yes.
Recently. Could you talk a little bit about, because obviously there are a lot of people that, there are a lot of folks, particularly in professional services, that are going the other way right now. But why are you guys so confident in that?
So there's a couple of reasons. One, when we talk about just entry-level jobs and people in general, we think AI's job is to solve problems. We believe the human endeavor is to find the problems to be solved. Okay, so we're never going to know all the problems. The world evolves. We put a good tool like AI against a problem to solve it. It's going to create new ideas for us to solve. The human endeavor is to create, and AI is to solve. So that's the first piece. The second thing in general is for AI, in an enterprise, even talking about the digital twin has a body of work that has been stored in a database. That's shared knowledge now. So you can borrow knowledge to do a task. So we actually see greater demand for entry level and early career starters because they don't need to go learn over 20 years what the person retiring knows. If we can capture the knowledge of what that person retiring can bring to the table, that shared knowledge, that borrowed knowledge, can accelerate their learning and get them to higher level tasks faster. In fact, we're recording this on a Thursday. Next Monday, we're going to announce in the United States 1,500 new jobs for college grads.
Wow,
because
congratulations.
we believe, we're very excited about it. We believe the flattening of that work pyramid and that constant learning is spot on for people coming out of college and learning and doing. And AI is the enabler of that.
And what advice would you give to some percentage of those people who join your team as new communicators? What advice would you give them?
Experiment. I've lectured on a couple of different campuses. I've spoken to other communications teams. When I was trying to build the digital twin, I was getting messages. I think I was using Claude to help me do a specific task. And it was saying, stop, you're breaking everything. Don't do any more. Like, whatever you're doing is wrong, just stop. And I was like, but why? What am I breaking? I'm not harming anybody. And I just sort of kept powering through it. And eventually it worked.
Tell me about the fantasy football blog you built.
Yeah, it's called Roster Rumblings. It's completely silly. And it goes out, it reads 15 to 20 fantasy football websites. It then rewrites content, AI enabled. It goes find a public license image and it posts it on Instagram just for fun, not commercial. I don't do anything with it. And it allowed me to start playing with coding. It allowed me to start asking better questions of my agencies on what I could expect from them. It allowed me to see what kind of content worked and didn't work with certain audiences. And it was pure experimentation that didn't hurt anybody. So when I had to figure out how to do something at work, I had some ideas what I was talking about. And I think people are using AI in their personal lives more than they are at work because of either cost or technology barriers based on where they work. That's going to get knocked down as the cost of LM licenses, morph, change, whatever it might be, and permissions go up and security gets better. So just keep playing.
Yeah. And then just lastly, from a communications perspective, do you have a dream function that you wish exists, that you hope somebody solves, that you think could really transform your team or use case?
I had a team at IBM that spent a lot of time paying attention for rapid response, watching the online zeitgeist and figure out how to respond. I'd like to see that come back to life with sort of, rather than the negative news, think about a positive news shop that's constantly paying attention to what's being said and how we can combine human effort and AI effort to amplify the brand potential. For me, that would be the next thing I'd build as soon as I can.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for joining today, Jeff. This has been a ton of actionable impact, I think, for communicators at all levels and all organizations. So really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.